Thank you for joining me today on The Talent Current. I am so excited to introduce my guest, Abby Hopper, the former CEO and president of SEIA, Solar Energy Industry Association. Please join me in welcoming her. It is early May 2026, and I'm so excited for my guest. I have been courting Abby Hopper since I had the privilege of meeting her at Fight Night in 2025 at RE Plus. A good friend of mine, or good friend of ours, introduced us, and little did I know she was slowly making her way towards leaving her almost 10-year career as the president and CEO of SEIA. And I'm just so pleased to have Abby on the show today. And let me first take a moment to pass the mic to Abby and say welcome and thank you for being here.
Well, Mindy, thank you so much for inviting me. It's quite an honor. Yeah.
Really, my angle here is to talk through like your leadership ethos and kind of like get more into who is Abby Hopper versus who is the former president and CEO of SEIA, because your last few episodes are really good about going into your career history. So there's a lot of great content out there about you, but I'd love to dig in a little bit more into you because I think you are very interesting and wonderful. You started your career as a firefighter, and then you became a divorce attorney, and then you got into solar without, as I understand it, very much experience in solar, and became the president and CEO, first female president and CEO for SEIA, where you went through a lot of, I don't know, ebbs and flows in the industry, as it were. So what I would love to do with you today is talk about what drives you. What was the impetus for you to make some of the career choices that you did that brought you here today?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me again. And I am, it's been nice to have a little bit of time to sort of think about what my career has been to date. So I feel like I have even a better understanding of what I did and why and how I did it now that I've had a chance to breathe for a few months. But I would say that the kind of two sometimes at odds um, like principles that I was always managing were I always wanted to love what I was doing, right? Like I was not ever going to be satisfied if I was just sort of complacent or comfortable or, had a job but not a passion. Like I have very high expectations for what I want from my professional life. And I'm wildly in love with my family and loved being a mom and loved my kids. And so um, that was sort of the other uh, guiding principle in my life. You can imagine at times those two came into conflict, um, only because there are just only so many hours in a day. And so I had to make it felt like constant decisions around which one had priority at a particular moment. And there was one career choice I made that ironically is what led me into energy. And so it ultimately became this uh, very powerful moment in my career trajectory. But at the time, felt like I was sort of putting my desire to prioritize my family way over my desire to prioritize my career. Um, and that was probably the moment in my life when the two things were in the most conflict. I made a decision that was better for my family than for my career, and then ultimately led me into energy, where I never ever would have come but for that opportunity.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that your move into energy afforded you more freedom to spend time with your family. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. My move it happened to be into energy. That's just because that's what it happened to be. I went from being an attorney in private practice to an attorney for the government, and
Mhm.
that there were a lot more boundaries around time and expectations there. Only 40 plus hours a week, not 60 plus hours a week. And that left me more time for my family. It just happened that I jumped into an area I knew nothing about and had no experience in, and that area was energy.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't so much about moving into energy, it was more moving out
No,
of private practice.
exactly. Yeah, it
Uh-huh.
was moving out of private practice and into something I literally knew nothing about, and took the job because the boss was someone I'd worked with before. I knew he was super smart and super interesting guy, and like I always want to be with smart, interesting people in my workplace, and I would have more time with my family.
Okay, so you strike me as someone who's very intentional about the decisions that you make, probably across the board, but focusing in on your career. So you made a move from private practice law into energy, and obviously you have a background in policy and politics. So there was a lot of synergies there. But now where you're at, it sounds like your intention again was to take some more time out for yourself and for your family. But I don't want to make assumptions, or I'd love to hear from you, like what prompted you to take this time, and what have you learned during this time? Because now you're like a full 3 months in.
Yeah, full 3 months in. It's like a lifetime. Um, so you're right. Like those sort of two priorities, love my job and love my family. Um, After 9 years, I decided, you know what? I do still love this job, but I feel like it's time for a change, right? It's just, I feel like I have given it so much of me and so much of my energy and my passion. And I feel like it's time to take a break, like recharge my batteries, reorient myself with the people in my life, my family. I just got married, so I wanted to, spend some time with my brand new husband, um, and sort of find that next thing that energizes me and I'm passionate about on the work side. So uh, it was very intentional, and I did it in a like first told my board chair, then told the board, then had a transition period, right? It was not like 2 weeks and I'm out kind of situation. It
Mhm.
was a very intentional transition. And it went, I mean, I think it went as well as transitions could go. So I actually feel really good about the way in which I exited.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, from the outside, it was very graceful. And yeah, I commend you for just having grace in your position, because I think your position was likely much more difficult than you maybe let on. And, what I would love to explore with you, because is this your fourth podcast recording since taking this break?
Sounds right. Hmm.
So you have obviously not, fully stepped away, and you can tell that this work is so important to you because you continue to advocate for the work, but really for the people in the industry. So I'd love to kind of hear like what this time has meant for you.
Yeah. So over the last 3 months, and there'll be more months ahead, I don't plan to go back to an office for a while longer, if ever. I honestly have spent time like getting to know our industry again, right? Like reading. So I read all the free news aggregators. I don't have all the subscriptions I used to have, but I read the free ones. So I'm following politically what's happened. I'm following kind of in our industry what's happening, and really just sort of focusing on the parts that I find that I'm curious about, right? Like I am incredibly curious about how technologies are being created that have built-in grid flexibility, right? Like that so it's not only how we utilize the resources and sort of maintain flexibility on the grid in that way, but also sort of the hardware itself has the ability to do that. I think that's incredibly interesting. I think kind of this effort amongst a bunch of Democratic states with a Republican president to really push PJM to think about, how to run auctions so that we have enough capacity. I've um, I've become really interested in like governance issues around artificial intelligence. You want to talk about a place where policy and politics and sort of a new industry converge. Governance and AI is one of them. I'm interested in sort of the equity issues around AI, both AI trainings, but also how we as humans are using AI and who has access to it and who doesn't, and how people feel comfortable with it. So it's been really fun over the last few months to be curious, right? And do a lot, not some, a lot of my own research. And I've also spent some time thinking about solar sisters and sort of what do I want that to be like? What do I want to build there? One thing I know about myself is I really like building things. I really like building things. And so the idea that I have kind of this clean slate and this initiative of solar sisters to grow and build whatever I can vision is super exciting. So I've spent some time in the last few months thinking about what that might look like.
Yeah, I want to talk more about Solar Sisters because I'm really keen to hear what you've got cooking and
Yeah.
what kind of ideas you have if you're willing to share. But
Sure.
yeah, I think what I'm hearing too is like right now you have more freedom to explore and research topics that are more interesting to you or like the most interesting to you. I mean, is that wildly different than what you did in your position with SEIA? Because some of these things sound probably similar to your work.
They are all similar to my work, but I didn't sort of have the freedom to dive deep. Kind
Mhm.
of at my core, I love policy, right, and I love uh, understanding the details and the corners and the edges of policy. I didn't have time, and it wasn't really my job to dive deep into it, right? My job
Okay.
was to do a number of other things. So that's been really fun, to kind of have that freedom and then be like, okay, and now I'm going to go to the gym. Like, okay, I've read articles about this and sort of gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Now I'm going to cook dinner. Ability to have this much control over my own schedule
Uh-huh.
is so freeing. It's so freeing. Like I would always joke when I was at SEIA that my schedule was really flexible, except for when it wasn't.
Mhm.
Like I nobody should ever feel bad for me, but like there were times when I could move things around and say, well, I can't do this, but I can do that. But then there were other times like that I didn't have any flexibility, right? Events that I had to go to, political things I had to attend, board events I had to attend. And, probably like a lot of people, like I could tell you 6 months in advance for what city I was going to be on at any day of the week because there was so much travel. And, so it's been really nice. I still have been traveling a lot, honestly, but it's all been of my own creation, which is very different.
It's amazing what that like your own free will, how it changes the rhetoric completely. Like it just makes you more energized because you're choosing to do it, but you can still have just as much impact, if
Yeah,
not more.
yeah, yeah. No, I feel honestly, I thought like when I left, I would feel like okay, I can say anything I want now, um, and I do say anything I want, and I don't feel like anything I say is particularly controversial, so it's not like wildly different, but it is. There's a freedom there in kind of having total control over what I do and say and where I am, what city I'm in and like what time zone and all that stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about Solar Sisters then, because I imagine that is also a platform for you to get to talk about some of the things that are really important to you in advocacy. So where is Solar Sisters today?
So, so this is the word I've come up with. At the moment, it is an initiative, which means there's no corporate structure of any kind. But it is. I think we're well over 750 people that have said, yes, I want to know more about Solar Sisters. Please include me. We're having monthly book groups online, which is, I'm so passionate about reading. So that's been like such a source of joy. We were doing that before, but that has continued. Um, I so I have spent some time thinking about like what is Solar Sisters and really come up with these three pillars. One is about service. So um, there's just something different about giving back to your community or giving back to like people when you do it with other people, right? Like it's always meaningful, but doing it in community uh, is so meaningful. So in early March, and like nine other women and I partnered with Let's Share the Sun Foundation um, as the Solar Sisters, and we went down to Puerto Rico and we celebrated International Women's Day, and we went to a domestic violence shelter and to help cut the ribbon on battery and solar, and then we did an all women build the next day. Like that was amazing, and so there will definitely be more of those kind of service opportunities because the relationships we built with each other and the connections we made with the women in the shelter and the homeowner who we helped was, it really grounded me in like, oh yeah, this is why I care so deeply about this work, and this is why this work really matters. So that's one. The second one is really about growth, and growth being sort of what you might sort of more stereotypically think of, right? Like professional growth, and opportunities to hear from people who maybe have a different experience than you, or I did that a lot before with hosting dinners or hosting receptions and having guest speakers, everyone from like, the CEO of EDPR to Sarah Elfreth, the Congresswoman from Maryland, like, women leaders who can sort of talk about where they've been, but in a smaller, intimate setting. And then, so that will continue. And then the third is connection. And I think, one of the things that is magical to me about Solar Sisters gatherings is that we are unapologetically open about the fact that we're whole human beings, right? And so you might attend as an expert in regulatory, in FERC regulatory policy, and you have three children and you're caring for a parent with dementia, and you really love 80s music. I don't know, I made that up. But I don't feel like there's a ton of space where we acknowledge the fact that we come with all these different roles, and balancing all of them. Like sometimes I've been at receptions and you might start talking to someone about, oh, your kid is in gymnastics, my kid's in gymnastics, how do you, the schedule is crazy, but it's almost always like sort of quiet, and like, you don't want to get caught talking about your personal life at a professional networking event. And so it's a little bit of turning that model on its head and saying, you know what, like I'm better as a worker when I could talk about everything that's happening in my life, because that's just the reality. So it's been really rewarding to kind of build community around those things, and so more of that to come. I'm having a little Solar Sisters strategy session with two of my Solar Sisters next Monday at the beach, of all places, so that we can witness the beauty of the ocean and get super creative.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And there's so much in here that I want to unpack with you because like what you're describing to me is like kind of the difference between like a masculine leadership and a feminine leadership. And it's taken us a really long time to be able to get to this level where we can bring our whole selves to work. Because when I was in my early years in my career, it was very much that like leave it at the door sort of mentality where you could not bring whatever happened at home into the office. And but the other way was okay, you could bring what you did at work back home. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious for you, like, is this something like what came first for you? Did you notice a gap here, or was this something that like you always led with this sort of like vulnerability and your whole self. And then the Solar Sisters was born from that.
It's a good question. I feel like when I was, I started my career in law firms. I spent over a decade, or I guess a decade, in the private practice of law at law firms where I was billing every 6 minutes. And it was definitely not, um, it was not, you know, you just had to leave it all at home, right? Like that wasn't a place where conversations like, my daycare is falling through the cracks or my kid has strep or whatever were really welcomed. And I would, I definitely was made friends with sort of the other, mostly women in similar circumstances. There were a couple of us in private practice that would talk, I would say like sideways, like we were similarly situated. I didn't have great models of it above me. So we sort of went sideways. But it certainly wasn't a leadership style. It was just like trying to survive. And then when I got into positions of leadership, sort of the longer, the more I was in sort of the public face and the more that I um, was leading, I just thought, like, this is crazy, right? Like, this is crazy. And I'm finally in a position where I can open up conversations around some of these things and normalize some of these discussions. And so that happened first. And honestly, like it's very selfish. It happened mostly because I needed to talk about these things, right? I couldn't pretend, I can't be like leading a federal agency of almost 700 plus people and ignore the fact that, it was an hour and a half commute in and an hour and a half commute back. And it meant I missed most sporting events for my children for a period of years, right? Because I just couldn't, can't get to a 4 o'clock game when you're an hour and a half away in DC. So that was just real. That was just true. And some of the women that worked for me closely, like my close staff, were brand new moms, and so they had to leave to make daycare pickups, and I knew what that was like, and so I protected the time for them because I was in a position to be able to do that. And then as I sort of grew in my own career and my own leadership, I realized that, I have now gotten to a point where not only can I, but I feel like a deep responsibility to speak about these things because I can, right? Because we do have these power structures and we do have, it's a lot less risky for me to say,
Mhm.
hey, don't schedule 8 o'clock meetings because that is when people drop off children for childcare. Or, I also took care of both of my parents in different decades, thank God, who were sick and ailing. My parents were divorced, so it was, like there wasn't another person to do it. My brother and I, and so creating space for that kind of caretaking as well. So Solar Sisters came out of a long history and career of doing that, but the specific initiative came out of just writing on LinkedIn to my solar sisters. Like just one day, I was like, it wasn't. I did not have a whole big strategy. I just typing away, and I wrote to them, and then I kept writing, and then I read an article about a new bar that was opening up in Washington a couple of years ago, and it was called Buzz Bar, and it was a non-alcoholic bar that was founded by a woman in recovery. And I thought, well, let's just go there. That sounds pretty cool. Let's host a brunch there. And that was the first Solar Sisters event.
It's so good. Like everything, again, there's like intention behind it, but it also was very organic. Like you weren't trying to force it. And like what I really appreciate what you've done in your career and what I've witnessed the last like 6 to 12 months when you really started to speak up on LinkedIn is kind of your like just your genuine humanness that you bring. And like you want to share that because you want to show that these things don't come easily to anyone. And like we all have this I don't know, more complicated life than maybe what is on the Zoom screen or, in front of the board or whatever the case may be. And that's so important because then it gives people permission to, ask for the things that they need and um and honestly I think probably be more productive and be more creative. So that's also something that I know is really important to your leadership ethos is this creativity component. So we talked a little bit about your curiosity, but what does creativity mean for you as a leader?
Um, I mean, I think what it means for me, you could ask the people that I worked with, but that there were lots of different ways to accomplish something, right? Like if our job at SEIA was to convince people of a particular position, right? You can do that through going and meeting with them. You can do that through writing op-eds. You can do that through making funny videos. You can do that through having an event back in their district, right? And so the like really encouraging people to think creatively around uh, how we're going to do it. Like I would often start meetings with, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? Before you tell me what we're going to do, help me understand what problem we're trying to solve. And then let's like be creative about all the different ways we could solve that problem, you know? Uh, Sometimes I feel like we can just sort of get moving on the plan without really understanding where we're headed and why.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I can relate a lot to that philosophy. I think I've taken that approach. And then once you start to build on it, you can start to kind of like peel away what isn't serving you or isn't working,
Mhm.
depending, the platform is. But it also sounds like what you've done is created some psychological safety for your team to be able to kind of throw out ideas and workshop what they're thinking about, even if it doesn't end up being the final product, which is so important because I think like authority can really stifle creativity. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you really like open it up that people can feel safe to say things and not feel stupid or feel like they're saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I mean, I did the same thing in return. Like I would always say, okay, you guys, I have a lot of ideas. Not all of them are good. And you have to tell, like, I need your help in discerning. Like, that's a good idea. That doesn't make any sense. Or, maybe like it's fine. So oh, someone the other day, someone called me an idea fairy. I love that phrase, right? Like you give me any topic and I can come up with like 27 different ways that we could sell it or promote it or advocate for it or get these people involved. And like maybe one of them's a good idea, maybe 26 are terrible, but like I love that's sort of where the creativity comes in. Like I love the generating of the ideas. And so I'm hopeful, I think, that like that sort of enthusiasm for generating ideas and then we can look at them critically and be like, okay, these make sense and these don't, but you got to have that initial burst of
Mm.
I'm trying to think of a word besides creativity of
Yeah,
ideas.
yeah, good. So you really, as I've gotten to know you a bit more, and even before we got to speak a few times, everything I'd ever heard about you through the network, through the solar network, and anything I had seen like through your external commentary, be that LinkedIn or speaking at events, you really exude this compassion and kindness, and you're very approachable, which for the positions that you've held, I think is unique. I don't want to say you're the only person to have ever done it, but I do think you really have this unique presence with the positions that you've held in the industry. And I want to ask you like what that means to you and like or maybe like what is your leadership ethos that's how you show up.
Yeah, so it's such interesting feedback for me to get because I it's just like kind of how I am. So I'm not like kind of curating myself to for a specific outcome. But I have gotten that feedback before that I am very approachable. And I think one is it's a combination of how I show up that way and my leadership ethos is I'm really interested in people. Like I just find people infinitely fascinating. And I really I love their stories and I love hearing about what makes them passionate. And I feel like there's so many more things we have in common than we have in difference. And so I'm always curious about kind of what makes people tick and what's their story. So if I'm chatting with someone, honestly, I probably don't want to hear about their newest gadget that they developed that's going to make the internet, 1% faster. Well, maybe 1% faster. That's pretty impressive, but whatever. But what I really want to know is, what book are you reading, or where are you traveling, or what's on your mind. I always, every time when I'm at work functions, my first question is always is how is business. It's not because how is business could take someone anywhere from my employees are amazing to I can't sell my widget to I'm really scared to I've had the best year I've ever had, right? And you can sort of work with that. That's something that's someone really telling you a lot more than just what their business is about. I will say the one sort of downside of the way that I show up in the world is sometimes people they mistake kindness for weakness, or I'm speaking totally from personal experience here, or they think because I don't feel the need to come into a room and speak first and speak loudest, that somehow I'm not certain of what I believe, or have any kind of hesitation about where I'm going or how my organization is going. And so I try to be 100% myself and also cognizant of the rooms I'm in, right? So if I'm testifying in front of Congress, I have a different, literally, tone in my voice than if I am, standing up in front of 30 solar sisters and talking about and welcoming them to a space.
Yeah, that, again, I feel like in my world, the way that I interpret that is like a masculine and feminine energy that you bring into the workplace. And I don't mean decidedly male or female, but
Hmm.
masculine and feminine, and that you don't need to show up and take up all the space in the room, which I think is a leadership virtue.
Yeah.
But it's a newly defined leadership virtue. People are now starting to notice the people who aren't the loudest in the room, and the people who are the loudest in the room. It's like, that's
What are they
actually
delivering?
creating, yeah, what are you trying to prove here? So, but that's it. That's interesting. I think we could probably do a whole other episode about personas that we have i- in our lives, but especially in work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think that's one of the things, what is my leadership ethos is that I actively do not aspire to be kind of the typical leader, right? I do not aspire, it is not my goal to be the loudest person or to be the center of attention or to be, um, dictatorial in my decision making. I am much more comfortable and I think it's 1,000% more effective, right? It's not that I'm afraid to be dictatorial. I certainly can be, ask my children. But I think you get much better outcomes when you have a collaborative process and as a leader, provide clear guidance of what the boundaries are, and if there's budgetary boundaries or political boundaries or whatever. But um that feels really important to me, to reject this idea that there's one way to lead, right? And it is sort of more aligned with typically masculine characteristics. I'm call bullshit on that.
Yeah, yeah, love that. Okay, there's something else that you said that I want to go back to about kindness is weakness. And I think that our rhetoric is changing from that a lot, but it hasn't fully been realized. But something else that you and I talked about is the difference between being nice and being kind. And I want to take a moment here to talk about that and what you
Yeah.
believe is the difference.
So I think it's a really important difference, right? Because and sometimes people use the words interchangeably, but I think they're very different. And I think to me, and just my interpretation, nice is sort of doing like on the surface, sort of people pleasing, right? Telling someone what they want to hear, making something a little smoother. Whereas kindness is like a deep belief in wanting what's best for another person. So sometimes kindness doesn't look very nice, right? Kindness might be setting a boundary. Like I always tell my team, like clear is kind, right? If you're having to deliver hard news, if you're having to tell a member something they don't want to hear, or a staff person, kind, clear is kind. It might not feel nice in the moment, because you wanted the answer to be yes, and the answer is no. But kindness is like really respecting the other person and being having enough respect for them to tell them the truth. People say to me a lot, like, "Oh, you're so nice," and I always sort of chuckle. I'm like, I don't know that I'm that nice, but I do aspire to be very kind, right? And it's sort of that fundamental, like I said, I just really like people, like a fundamental belief that each person is worthy of dignity and has value, and so it informs how I speak to people just in the world, right? How I speak to people that I interact with in public, how I behave on airplanes, like all of those places where no one's really watching, and and I'm not on a stage, but I just am going through life and you know trying to be kind.
Yeah.
Part of my personal like resistance, right? I don't love the way the world is evolving at the moment. Like I really don't like it. And so there are lots of different ways to resist and lots of conversations about resistance. And um, one of the ways that I decided in January of 2025 that I was going to resist was to focus on kindness.
Mhm. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I think you've done a really a great job of defining the two because in my mind, as I was preparing for this episode, that's exactly what I was thinking. That nice is people pleasing, and people pleasing is not always kind because you're kind of assuming that the person that you're being nice to can't handle direct
Yeah.
feedback or real feedback or to know what you really think about X,
Hmm.
whatever it is that you're being nice about. And kindness is compassion. I've been in a position where I've had to let people go in my career, and I'm sure you have as well. And that's a really difficult conversation to have every time. I would lose sleep over it the night before because you always know that it's coming and they may or may not. I always chose to go into that room with compassion that if this is the right choice for the business, it is the right choice for them too, and that they will be better somewhere else. And that's, I'm just kind of picking a random example, but a difficult conversation is less difficult when you realize that the person on the other side of the conversation has a stake in this too, whatever the outcome is. And if you come with that compassion and that kindness that you actually care about where they go post this conversation, then having difficult conversations isn't as hard anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not as hard, and the relationship can continue, right? Past what could be a relationship ending moment. Uh,
Mhm.
and that's been my experience in many, many of those conversations, is that the relationship continues even if we're no longer working in the same place.
So, to wrap up our episode today, I want to ask you what advice you would give to people. I mean, look, you have worked really hard in your career. That's clear for anyone who's been paying attention. And so I would say certainly it's a privilege that you get to take time off, but it's also this privilege didn't come easy. You've earned this time. What would you tell people who maybe are in a position of burnout or need a reset but don't have the opportunity to leave? Like, what advice would you give to people who are maybe having a hard time and need a break but can't take it?
Yeah. No, it's I mean, you described me for like, a while. There's like I had financial realities, right? I have three children. I was up until a few months ago a single mom. So I did not have as much freedom to make a choice like this because I had too many other people relying on me. And now they're older and sort of moving through school and stuff. So I have a little bit more flexibility. But I would say um, two things. One is find other people that you can talk to about what's really going on. Um, if you're burned out by your work or you're burned out by your caretaking or you're burned out by all the travel, like whatever it is, start with the people that you trust the most and maybe the people that are similarly situated and kind of be able to articulate and talk about and get some support around that. And then maybe it's time to go to your employer and say, hey, I need to travel less, or I'd like to move on to, in my career, advance to a different team, or, something within that sphere to change it so you're not so burned out. And then some like self reflection. Like for me, airplane time was a great time for self reflection, right? There's this weird ambient noise and you can put on your noise canceling headphones and then you're literally and you're just in your own space. And, ask yourself what would sort of light the spark again. Is it a different assignment? Is it a different colleague? Is it reading a book every night? Like whatever it is. Like I have a friend, Randy Braun, that talks about like what's the 1% chance thing you can change today. Perhaps not your whole life on a Monday morning, but maybe one thing. Like I remember people would say like, oh, just add in, an hour of figure like exercise, meditation, reading, whatever. And it would almost make me cry because it was so uninformed about what my life really looked like to imagine that I had an extra hour sitting around that somehow I wasn't using. But did I have an extra 2 or 3 minutes? Sure. Right. Like, and maybe it was while I was commuting to work, or maybe it was like 3 minutes before I got out of bed, or just, pack it all in on the airplane. But those little pockets of time for me in my career have been really impactful because I didn't have the kind of space to do what I'm doing now, which is, like wondering about the world. Wondering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the main message that I'm hearing is community. Find
Totally.
find community, find support. Like I think this expectation that like we have to do it alone on an island. I don't know where that came from or if that's just kind of like an instinct survival thing. But yeah, seek out community, seek out mentors, seek support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's changed my life. It's like changed the course of my career, changed the quality of my career, and changed my life. Yeah. People that I get to spend it with. So reach out.
Well, thank you so much, Abby. This has been everything I could have hoped for and more. I feel like we could probably talk for another hour easily. You're such an interesting person. You're such a great leader. You're such a like an icon in this industry. So thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done and for continuing to participate in a meaningful way. I'd love to get to see you and like how much you're doing for the solar right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for your great work.
Thank you for joining me today on the Talent Current and for listening to Abby's story. It's been so great to get to explore Abby's leadership philosophies, her ethos, and just get to know her on a more personal level. There's so much content about Abby out there on the internet about her career, her incredible career. She's done such a great job of creating But I really look at Abby as a trailblazer in our industry and for female leaders all over. So please take a moment to comment, like, and share our episode because I'd love to give Abby more airtime. Thank you again.